welcome all those that are attending here live to this Real Talk episode, where we have the pleasure of talking with real everyday leaders about truly amazing insights and stories. I am so grateful to have on here today Rod Walker, who is the president of consulting at Kotter, and the work that they've done, founded by John Kotter. And Rod, I believe it's safe to say that you have a big influence, a big footprint, your organization, and a lot of it focuses on leadership and culture change. Is that an accurate description?
That's 100% correct, yes.
Great. And so, Rod, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you're busy. How you doing? You're in Atlanta, right?
Yep, doing well, yes.
Good.
Healthy and safe.
Being safe. So you're at home. Kotter has offices, I know, in Seattle. I've been in your office in Seattle, and Boston, I believe. Is that right, or is it New York?
Yes, it's Boston, right? And it's actually Cambridge, right in Harvard Square.
Okay. And then you guys do work all over the world, don't you? So
absolutely, yes.
Well, Rod, why don't we start? I just want to give you a chance to, tell us a little bit about who you are, what your story, how did you get from your early years to where you are today? I know see if I got this right. You got an MBA at North Carolina, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've done a lot of business. You got some education, some business education at Harvard, that small little school called Harvard, right?
Yes.
And so I know that much about you. I know that you've had quite a bit of experience even before you started with Kotter, Deloitte, and a couple of other consulting firms along the way. And you've been with Kotter how long now?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, what else should we know about Rod Walker?
Well, you mentioned some of the big schools. I would say my education and foundation really started at Clark Atlanta University, which is a historically Black college and university in Atlanta. And from there, so at Clark Atlanta, I started out in engineering. So was in computer science and started off doing software development when I was a young pup. And that didn't really suit well with me. I needed something faster paced that dealt with really the challenging problems that executives and organizations were having. So I quickly moved into consulting.
And you've enjoyed it, apparently. It's not for everybody.
Yes,
you must thrive.
It's not for everyone. I've been in consulting 22 years-ish, somewhere around there. Yeah. I started out at a boutique firm, still consulting, but doing more on the technology management side. Okay. And then I quickly moved into really doing strategy. IT strategy led to business unit and corporate strategy, and that led into organization transformation work, which is where I'm spending a lot of time now. And I'll tell you a little bit about Kotter, but all of this work before Kotter was focused on the head. At Kotter, we have principles around the head and the heart. And I was focusing on helping executives solve their problems from the head perspective. And an example of that is, they may say, very focused, we need to take our organization from 1,500 people to 750 people. And very head focused, let's do the spans and layering, move from a federated model to a consolidated model and put everybody in the organization, and you're saving costs and your bottom line. Done. No heart piece of how the organization is really going to change the culture. You put an operating model, but how do you really get people bought in on the change that can be sustainable over time?
Gotcha.
Coming to Kotter, for me, it was a completion of having that heart focus with the work that I consider my expertise area. And now we not only help with the head piece, but we do it in a manner where the change can be systemic, and the change is not, the Kotter team coming in and doing a change for the organization. It's coming in and helping guide the organization on a journey and helping them build their capabilities over time, and which leads to sustainable change. Dr. Kotter, before he founded the firm 13 years ago, he's done 40 plus years of research as a Harvard professor, and he worked one-on-one with some of the top executives and some of the most well-known brands across the world. And he wanted to do more than just helping those individuals. He wanted to really begin to help the individuals help the organizations. So he started the firm to do just that. And we like to think that when we're helping an organization, we're doing it on that head and that heart spectrum, and we're giving them sort of a framework where they can own their change. Each organization's change is going to be different. And we think that a few things lead to sustainable change. It's around leadership behaviors being changed, number one being defined, then being changed. Those behaviors and that behavior change become habits over time. And once you continue to do those habits and get quick wins within the organization, that's the only way that you have that formula that sustainable change can occur.
That makes sense. I appreciate that. Now, Rod, the work that we do, most of our clients really are kind of the mid-size organizations, so a mid-size city, an electric utility. We've done work with the big ones, the global brands that you'd recognize, right? Yeah. But that isn't where we've excelled. We've done good work there, but most of the work that we've done is kind of the mid-size organization, from a nonprofit to a manufacturing to a utility, that type of thing. I imagine that most of your clients, are they larger than that? Or could you describe the ideal project and the ideal client for Kotter in some way?
Yes, our clients have they across the spectrum. So we'll have even some not-for-profit organizations that lead to smaller organizations, and then we have some of the global brands. I'm currently working on a huge client in the oil and gas industry in Australia, and they have unique challenges. But from what does a typical engagement looks like? We look at it on a three-dimensional range, and I'll quickly describe. I don't want to go too deep and bore people, but the first thing that we do, most organizations already have a strategy, and that's perfectly fine. What we're trying to do when organizations come to us or they're looking to really change, we look for them to ask the question, how can we take, using our strategy as sort of a background, how can we articulate a window of opportunity that is open for us, that will close very quickly, that we need to take advantage of? And the leadership team, we work with the leadership team to define that. So that's sort of the third dimension. The two dimensions is, and all of these are straight from John's IP. This is what I'm about to describe now is, think of it as going 1 inch deep and a mile wide. What we're trying to do is have behaviors change with hundreds and thousands of people in an organization. Hundreds, it may be a small, medium-sized organization. Thousands, it can be some of the large enterprises, global enterprises that you can imagine. But we're trying to go where the energy is within that organization. Think of it, an example I like to use with clients. When you're thinking about the energy and how susceptible people are to change, when a new iPhone comes out, there's always, even during a pandemic, I suspect when the new iPhone comes out, people are going to be camped out, ready to get that new iPhone. Those are the people in the organization that you want to go to first, because you'll say, we have this window of opportunity. We're going to change this organization. It hasn't been done before. And those people are like, sign me up for it. I don't know what it is yet, but it sounds great. I want to do that. Then you have people, and I think I'm in this category, where I'll let folks get that iPhone. I'll let that first update come out. And if it doesn't crash, boom, I'll go get it. That's the next level of people. Those people need to see some things happen. It's not enough to be jazzed about something. Let me see, this first couple of weeks and see what's going to happen. So we like to get the masses of the folks energized around that big opportunity and begin to articulate that throughout the organization. So you may be thinking, well, how is that going to drive change? But some organizations or companies that do culture change or human capital type work, they'll just stop at that level. But we take it to this second dimension, which is the third dimension in the framework I'm talking about. is we're focusing on those people ladder on that sort of adoption curve. These people, and a lot of executives are like this because most executives come up through operations. They want to see what are the hard business results that this change is going to help us achieve. And I don't want to understand business results that's going to happen, 24 months, 30, 36 months down the road. I need something that's going to really happen this calendar year. So what we help them do, and think of this as going an inch wide, but a mile deep. So we're going very deep in the organization from a cross-functional standpoint. And when I say cross-functional, we like to get the people that are closest to the work that's being executed, and they're executing these challenging problems that haven't been able to get done before, are seemingly impossible. It's always been our list, but we're just not going to do it because we want to get this new shiny object done over here. But we help them execute those things in 90 days. And what we're telling the leadership team to do in that instance is, let's focus, leadership team on pushing the work down to the managers that are closest to the work so they can make decisions faster and they can execute faster. So what you have in this three-dimensional system now, Mark, is now you have these, what I talked about earlier, these behaviors from people actually executing. So think of a portfolio of these things that are going deep. All those folks are doing, establishing new behaviors, building new habits, getting quick wins, and the same thing for the workforce activation piece that's going wide across the organization. So you got all these behaviors, habits coming. Now, once that entire system run together gives you a sustainable change that's not, Kotter, we're not owning that. When we go away, all of those capabilities are built within the organization, within the system, and they're keeping those, and slowly but surely, they're changing the trajectory of where that organization is going, thus changing the culture of that organization.
Gotcha.
That was a long-winded answer, but sorry.
No, that was great. And I just want to summarize. So the 1 inch, you're really talking about a focused initiative. You're not changing the entire world. It's one specific area, but then you're taking that very deep into the organization with the behaviors and the regimens and the patterns, whatever the habits, so that it sticks, so that it lasts long after Rod Walker's gone and the Kotter organization has left that organization. Although you probably work with some clients for long term, right? For many years.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, that's great. And you're the president of consulting. So can you kind of give us an idea, a window into what your world's like? What does that role mean? Because I know I've met some of the other people at your organization. How do you fit in the organization? What do you end up doing on a regular basis?
I'm about 4 weeks or so into the role. It's, if I met someone in the elevator and they say what you do, I would say, I work for Kotter. We're the world's leader in transformational change, that elevator pitch. But really what I'm about is helping leaders within the organization. You can think of it as executives, extended executive team, senior managers, all the way down within an organization. But I'm helping them shift their mindsets. And it could be a growth mindset. It can be an accelerated mindset, whatever mindset it is that they're trying to target. I'm helping them get unstuck or move from a fixed mindset. And I start that answer like that because that's what I'm trying to do on the inside. Okay. So my primary role in this new role is twofold. Number one is to grow the organization. And our mission is around millions leading, billions benefiting. Oh. So if we grow, we achieve our mission. So that's number one. Mm-hmm. Number two is significantly increasing the impact for our clients. And that's around that three-dimensional system that I talked about. Being able to have the workforces activated in a manner that's going to drive sustainable change for an organization is something that a lot of executives tell me it was one of our wildest dreams we thought could never be achieved. Having them achieve business results that are sustainable are things that a lot of organizations haven't been able to do. A lot of projects or initiatives continue to run for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
We help them shift their mindsets from, yes, we understand it's been done like that historically, but if you had a growth mindset and think about new ways of working, what could be possible? And just that little mind shift and the way that we ask some of the questions and facilitate some of the sessions help with that. And internally, so when I say growth, I want to define that. It's about growing people. It's about getting more people in the organization, but it's about increasing our footprint. Right now, we don't have industry designations. We pretty much help across industry.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get more intentional around working with the energy space and the federal space. Boy, do we know that the federal space needs a lot of help from a culture standpoint. And quite frankly, they're huge John fans. And, you know, they reach out to me and the firm all the time. We're looking at getting into change management. Now, a lot of people misconstrue change management with change leadership. And we're not trying to reinvent what we call in the black box of change management. We're just, you know, putting John's IP and our Kotter principles on the front end, the back end, and single threads and principles throughout that black box and help organizations in a better way.
So the change management's the mechanics, there's a lot of tools. There's a great big tool set for managing the change, but you're talking about the people side on the front end,
absolutely,
on the back end that really make it all happen, right? And you
absolutely
mentioned culture a few times. I know at Learning Point, we like to say that the two primary outcomes of good leadership in an organization is increased operating results and enhanced culture, that you're actually getting closer to having the culture that you want to have. And I know I've learned this from John Kotter. I mean, because he's been in my home, he's been in my office several times. He doesn't know my office, but he's been in there. And he talks about that most organizations have two cultures, right? They have the culture that is the real culture today, and they have the culture that they're aspiring to or that they're trying to achieve, right? So could you talk for just a minute about what you could share with us about culture and how challenging, how important it is, how challenging it might be to actually move that culture towards where you want it to be in an organization? What have you learned about that?
Yeah. You know, there's a couple phrases that I'll say. Culture is very hard, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
Culture change is very hard, full stop. Peter Drucker, I believe it was Peter Drucker that said, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. I've been into organizations where some of the people, not the folks that are like the ones standing outside the Apple store, but the ones that are on the other end of the curve, it's like, we're going to wait you guys out. You guys will be gone in 6, 9, 12 months. We'll wait you out, and our culture is going to permeate. So we hear a lot of that. What I would say is you have companies so this is going to be a broad generalization. A lot of companies are big and rooted in a deep history, one big bucket. Then you have companies that are very young, that are very innovative and very excited, want to do things fast, little to no bureaucracy or governance. And what we're saying is both systems are right. And what we want to do is when we're working with a large organization, there's a hierarchy that's powerful, but we help organizations try to build a dual operating system. And what that dual operating system is, taking the energy from that startup and building it alongside the hierarchy. So those folks that are standing in line first to get the Apple, the new iPhone, yeah, we want to take them out of the hierarchy, put them over here in what we call the network. And this network is built from folks that, and a quick example is if you're working in an oil and gas company and you hire someone who has digital expertise, but you hire this person as a project manager. Mm-hmm. And one of our big opportunities or windows of opportunity is really, doing a digital transformation. So that person that was hired to do project management, has a digital background, is now standing outside the door saying, yes, I want to be a part of this. So we take that person out of the hierarchy and put him or her into the network. And what we do when you're building this network, these folks are really just getting after it. They're doing very quick projects that are driving value to the organization immediately. An example that I think a lot of folks in the audience can relate to is when COVID hit, it was like, boom, everybody is 100% virtual. And now COVID's still here, but some offices and organizations are transitioning back to the workforce, or excuse me, transitioning back into the office.
Right.
And so what this network that is built can figure out is, how can we make the experience for those that want or need to come into the office the same, no different than the ones that are staying at home? How can you make that happen? So they would figure stuff like that out. How can we figure out, now that we only have people coming into the office half the time, what does this mean for our footprint in our organization? You know, we have 15 floors on a building. Does this mean that we can have 7 floors? Well, actually it means we can have 5 floors. And by the way, that's going to save us, $2.5 million a year. Right. Those are the things that the network do, those types of things. And once you have that dual operating system, you're now building those behaviors and habits that can sort of go back and forth. So now you're changing the culture. This hierarchy that is, boom, it takes forever to change. You got this stuff, they're like this little factory startup, in air quotes, that's getting a lot of great stuff done fast, building habits, and boom, you're just throwing it back and forth between the hierarchy. And that's that dual operating system and that sense of urgency that John has done so much research about, and we try to implement and execute at our clients today.
That's great. And COVID is one example, but 10 years from now, it'll be something else that network would be. I want to use the word ginning up energy. The network you're describing accelerates really the culture change energy in the organization. It kind of dissipates a little bit of the unneeded structure or stodginess of the hierarchy. Is that a good way to describe it?
Absolutely. One of John's books is actually called Accelerate.
Yeah.
And, often what we hear when clients are John fans and they come to us for work, they say, well, we know this change is going to be, a 5-year journey. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. And we want to change that misnomer that it takes that long to execute change. If you have a leadership team going, and I'm sorry to go back to that 3 dimension, but if you have a leadership team that can get aligned around an opportunity that, if they truly believe it's going to close, if we do not act now, they can start that dual operating model very quick and start to get things done, and then have those behaviors and habits go back to the hierarchy. And you have that systemic change that's shifting the mindsets and the culture of the organization. What we find a lot with organizations is the leadership team, they're still doing management work. And what I mean by that, they grew up in the organization. They were very good at their jobs. Let's say they're very good at operations. Yeah. And now they're in a leadership role. And what we advise and counsel is release those management duties, push that down within the organization, which means the network. And you focus on being one team, one voice, and having leadership behaviors that start with you and are accountable with you, that permeate throughout the organization. Now, they will have these things that are going on in the network. They'll have sponsorship duties over that, but only for an escalation purpose. When they push those management duties down to the network and those folks that are closer to the work, they're giving them the authority and the power to make those decisions, because oftentimes that's the definition of a hierarchy. Is I'm a manager and I know what's wrong, I know what needs to be changed, but I have to escalate it to my manager. He has to take it to his manager and then take it up the board. And before you know it, it's a month later. It's like, yes, you can go do that, and you push the button and it's done. No, we're we're letting them have that authority to make that change. Yes, it's all about getting things done at a faster rate.
Rod, you talked about government, that you work with government organizations, and we do too. We work with cities and counties, and there's been this interesting dynamic. It's not just with government organizations, actually with some of our other clients too, where there's this overspill, or I don't know what the right word is, this intermix of their culture within their organization and the culture within their community or society, right? Especially right now. Mm-hmm. Have you experienced any kind of intersection between what's going on in our society and our world today, and especially in the United States, with social injustice or any other kind of values that either collaborate with or rub up against the values of the organization and the culture of the organization? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's a small intersection, and I'll start off by saying that, and I'll start from an internal Kotter perspective, and I think, and I hope that a lot of organizations, and I know some of our client organizations are working, but I hope other organizations are as well. A couple of things that we have done internally is we've had 2 weeks of action, mm-hmm. One around systemic racism, and we're just wrapping up. Actually, we're in the middle of a week of action around sexism. Okay. And I have to say, I never thought I would ever have the types of conversations that I have had in the workplace that I had during both of these weeks of action internal to Kotter. We talked about racism from a standpoint where white privilege was brought up and talked about, and people were vulnerable. I was telling my story about how one of the examples is, generic white male, when you get stopped by a policeman, what do you think about? And an answer was, something's wrong. This must be a mistake. They mixed me up with another car. And what does Rod think about when he gets stopped? I'm thinking about, let me have my hands at 10 and 2. Let me have my license right here on my shoulder, ready to show them. So there's no quick movements. Uh-huh. So when we shared those types of stories, and it was very powerful. From an external perspective, when we talk about that piece of the 3 dimension where we're activating the workforce, and really we're helping the workforce get urgent. Some of the teams that those folks, those organizations and those leaders work on are things around DEI, having courageous conversations around what's going on in society, in their community. Because what we're finding a lot of is the individuals, the community are holding the organizations accountable. And in order to take action, the organizations are looking for their employees to have the right response. It's no longer acceptable for, choose your CEO to put a memo out and put it on LinkedIn. That's not acceptable. It's like, okay, great. What's next? What are you doing within your organization? And we're helping facilitate some of those conversations around, what does it mean to come to work and not see a woman in, the leadership team of 85? What does it mean to not see a woman of color or a person of color anywhere in management? And how can you fix that? So we're helping them have those types of conversations. And we provide a unique independent perspective on that as well.
That's great. I appreciate that. I know that if you go to your website, I think it's kotter.com, isn't it? Is that the main URL?
kotterinc.com, yes.
kotterinc.com, okay. You have right at the top of the website, I don't have it up right now, but you have I don't know what the right word is, a declaration or a statement that defines, I think it actually describes those 2 action weeks that you were talking about, the work that you've done internally. And now you've made a statement to the world, to all those that know who you are as an organization and what your where you stand and what you believe is important, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is very courageous, right, and very bold and exemplary of the leadership that you're practicing what you preach.
Yes.
So that's very interesting. And when you say you went through this as within you're working from the inside out, then is what that means to me, right?
Yes.
How many people were in the room? How many people were involved in that work that you're talking about internally?
It was, I don't know the exact numbers, but everyone in the firm was invited. It wasn't a have to, it was a want to.
Yeah.
And I would say on average about 35 to 40 folks. And just to be able to have those types of conversations
Yeah.
that, you know, I've shared some things that only close friends know.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, being comfortable to be able to share that, it's powerful from a standpoint that we're all part of the same organization and we need to be authentic, transparent, and respect each other. I think it helps us understand each other's point of view, but it also helps us be more authentic and actively listen and be able to be an independent party as we continue to help our organizations, our client organizations. And again, our mission is to have billions of people benefiting from the leadership that we help organizations and leaders enhance. And I think, you know, what we've done with these 2 weeks of action really makes each and every person within Kotter more equipped to help us get closer towards our mission.
So you went through this, 40 or so people. Was it virtual or was it, because it was during,
Yes.
it was virtual, okay. Which even, I mean, in some ways that facilitates certain things, but it probably could make things more challenging, I'm thinking too. But it sounds like it's been mostly, the net has been definitely positive in terms of bringing your people together. They understand each other more, the bonding that happened.
Yeah.
And the bridges that were built were much more valuable than any kind of seat of wedge or any kind of, because it does require a little bit of courage, right? To open up and talk about who you are and your vulnerability, as you mentioned. Is that an experience that you would recommend, or do you plan to recommend that as a consulting firm to the management teams, the leadership teams that you're working with? Is it something that could be foundational for any team that wants to move their organization at all when it comes to culture?
You know, that's a fantastic question, and I think my answer is yes. There's some principles there that are needed for leadership teams. When you think about psychological safety, when you think about not fearing retaliation from someone that is above you or more senior than you. When you talk about transparency, these are not issues at Kotter. These are issues for all organizations and all leadership teams.
Absolutely.
I think there's some things to understand and learn from those types of conversations. I think that with we can do that. We're a smaller organization, but when I work at global organizations and they have huge leadership teams, you have to start with the leadership team first. If they're not comfortable having the conversations with themselves, there's no way that they're going to be able to get the masses on board. So it's working with the leadership, building that trust, that authenticity, and that putting grudges behind and having those true courageous conversations really gets the leadership team aligned and focused. And then once you start demonstrating that in your meetings, in your conversations with the rest of the organization, that's when they'll start to build that trust. And then it becomes more of a two-way street.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned, there's certain things I'm sure you look for. There's certain things we look for, although we don't do the level of work you folks do, and our focus isn't culture like it is with you folks, with your organization. But you mentioned that you look for the demographics that might be there in a leadership team, in terms of male versus female, Black versus white, that type of thing, or any other kind of diversity on their team. But would you agree that people could fill that box, they could fill the slot. They could go find the person that meets a certain demographic. But that doesn't mean that they've done the work. It could mean that if they've done the work, that will be there, right? But fill in the box is just, that's not really where the real work has to happen. It seems like it's more along the lines of what you've just been describing.
Yeah.
The conversations and the depth of the leadership work that they have to do within the organization. Would you agree with that? Or how would you describe that?
I 100% agree. And it's not just like, transforming an organization or transforming a culture. It's not a point in time. You can't say, we transform this culture, now let's go be fruitful. It's a journey. And if you hire a minority woman into an organization, or any person of color into a leadership role in the organization, you're not done. You have to make sure that that person is empowered to do her job the best that she can. She's given every opportunity. That's one dimension. Another dimension is, how do you have a succession plan for her? So it doesn't stop, okay, we hired one, now we're done. No, how can you have more within the organization and have them look to the new person, the leadership, as a mentor and drive that? So what are the processes that are going to make this systemic within the culture of the organization? And, I think people get that, but it's not hard. It's not hard work. It's more, you have to be committed and you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. All right, thank you. So we do have a couple questions here. I want to get to those.
Oh, great.
One has to do with what we're talking about. So we'll take that one first. Tom says, with the need to fill in the box, how do organizations avoid this perception of tokenism? Maybe they do the right thing for the right reason, but they still get criticized or accused of, tokenism, or doing it for the wrong reason. Or how do you avoid that perception of tokenism? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, so I'll tell you a quick story. There's been, and this is part of what I talked about in our week of systemic racism. There's been a part of my career where I was always the most senior person of color. I was, in a lot of cases, the only person of color. There'd be times where every client that I worked in, and we were in the C-suite, and I was the only person of color. And that goes to the question that Tom was asking. I think that we have to look at, once you get someone in a role, you have to do, the organization is when I say you, have to do everything in their power to support and be a sponsor for that person. Give that person the right opportunities, coach that person on that. All of that is one dimension. And like I said a couple minutes ago, the other dimension is, you can't stop there. You can't be the only person in the organization and you say, look at that, we're done. I told you we were going to do it. No, you have to have mechanisms in place where you're bringing more people of color to the interview table. The goal should be that. The goal should not be, we're going to hire the next Rod. The goal should be, we're going to bring more people that look like Rod into the pool so we can begin to understand that there is talent. Now, Mark, I'll tell you this. As much as I think I'm a unicorn, I am not. There's no reason that more minority consultants looking like me can be successful. And I think, that's just an example of how people need to hire, but also have the mechanisms where they can continue to hire.
Yeah, along the lines of what you're talking about is that organizations shouldn't do this just because of the fairness of it. That's good. I mean, that would be good enough reason right there, right? But it makes good business sense, doesn't it? There's going to be a lot of talent, a lot of innovation, a lot of ideas, a lot of smartness, smartness that comes to people or comes to the organization because they're including this this mixture. I don't even like to use the word diversity. It's not, it doesn't describe it well enough. There's this infusion of ideas and life experience that will benefit the organization from a business standpoint if they do that. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree. One of my favorite words is accountability.
Okay.
And I think that there are forces that are holding organizations accountable now. Examples are, we talked about community before. There's communities that are holding organizations accountable that are in their city, in their community. There are funders that are holding boards accountable, saying we will take away our funding if you don't have more minority representation on your board. Not let's put a plan together and we'll do it over 5 years. We're talking now.
Yeah.
And so, you need to figure out a way to get people of color on your board now. And it's the same thing with, and that trickles down to the executive teams as well. It's just no longer, well, we'll get to that, or we'll have a minority on the leadership team and that'll cover us for 10 years. No, they're saying we need a quote unquote fair mix, whatever percentage that is. And funders and investors, communities, and just the general public are starting now to hold these organizations accountable. And the public is very powerful. They start shifting their money to other places or competitors. A lot of these folks will start to listen, and they have. You see, the boards of Uber. You see a lot of folks hiring people at all different senior leadership levels within organizations. Also, you're seeing organizations who never had a chief diversity officer are now hiring chief diversity officers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost a deficit if you don't have one at this point.
Right. Yeah.
That's great. I want to come back to that because I want to give you a chance to say whatever you'd like to say with regard to culture change and social change and whether or not this is going to work. But there's a question in here I want to hit before we forget. It has more to do with the COVID-19 thing. So when it comes to your practice and the work that you're doing as a firm with your clients right now, this is the question from Greg. How are you doing that? How are you helping your clients right now manage change and lead through change management and leadership with COVID? So you're working, you and I talked a little bit before this started about how much you're doing virtually. Is that working, or is it working to work with your clients virtually, or what's been the benefits and what's been the challenges when it comes to that?
Yeah, we are working 100%. Actually, no, we now have a federal client where we're doing some in-person work, but that's the only client. Everything else is 100% virtual. We are helping continue to drive change for organizations during this time. There's things that, so we think about what we're terming, actually what I'm starting to term is change. John has said it throughout his career, the rate of change is increasing. And now there's a higher rate of change. There's this change rate of the 2020s where things are just happening, on a weekly basis. And organizations are struggling to deal with that. And we believe at Kotter, that there's no other firm that's more prepared to help organizations address this change. Some of the things that we're helping organizations with is how can they return to the workplace? So organizations are now starting to think about, we may not go 100% back into the office. We're going to go some percentage less than that. How can we make that work in the most efficient and effective way? And all right, so what does that mean from our fixed cost standpoint? So now you can probably get rid of, 50 floors in a building. Now maybe you can get away with only having 15 floors. So we're helping them think through things like that. There's also a big push right now around digital transformation. We're helping organizations from helping them think about how their systems, their processes, and really their overarching modernization of how they do work. And so we're just helping them with those types of things. The other thing that's really key that we're helping organizations think about is I mentioned this earlier, is that mindset shift. You can think if you're, 150-year-old organization, and let's just take an insurance company, and now you can't go into the office or everyone's virtual. what's your mindset shift now when you think about what are the key initiatives that you need to do now? You're looking at your list of 50 and you're just like, wow, I made that list before COVID. What is still relevant on that list, if anything? Getting them in that frame of mind of the new normal may be something that is totally 180 degrees different than what you have always done in your entire career.
Yeah, that's a good point. And COVID, you mentioned the small windows, that you have this time window, which creates this opportunity. It's an opportunity window that has a time frame to it. Things like COVID, events like COVID can be a catalyst, even though we sometimes view them as an impediment. But wow, there's been a lot of things that open up, doors open up if leadership teams are taking advantage of it, where right now it's COVID is one of them, right? Maybe the social turmoil that's going on could be one too. These could serve as a catalyst for actually making the changes happen that really need to happen within the organization. We've got another question here. Can you spend just a minute more, Rod, talking about the difference in your mind between change leadership and change management? You talked about the black box, inside the black box is the mechanics of how can you differentiate those two?
I like to think that change management are the systems and processes around helping an organization adopt. An example is if you're rolling out a huge technology, let's call it SAP. You're
Mm-hmm.
rolling out SAP and to an organization where, let's say, they never had SAP before. Now you have the entire organization that has to use that where they haven't used it their entire careers. So how can change management be the conduit between the system and the people? And it's all about getting them to adopt the system, work in the system, teach them the tools, the techniques. It's more of that mechanical way of adopting that change. Change leadership is more about the people side of changing your behaviors. So, which is why we work a lot with the leadership teams. You have to do all of those mechanics in order to have your SAP system operate.
Right.
But if you don't have the behaviors and the habits that are going to, quote unquote, force you to actually do those things, you just spent millions of dollars on a system that no one's going to use.
Which does happen a lot.
It happens a lot, yes. And we're all about helping them institute those new behaviors within the organization.
Yeah, you mentioned the head and the heart. Excellent. Okay, there's another question on here that refers to a CEO making the comment, anonymous here. I'm not familiar with this comment, but it must have been a public comment. It says that, it's just hard to find Black folks. And so I want to go back to this idea of tapping into their network, because I think that's part of the point of this question from anonymous person attending, is that when you open the door to a whole new network when you find this talent that may represent a different demographic than what you might be otherwise used to in your organization. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this question is near, and I know the company is near and dear to me. I think that that CEO needs more exposure, and I'll tell my story. And, when people describe me, they kind of do what you did, Mark, not to put you on the spot, but there's like, yep, Harvard grad, UNC grad. And what was my first response? I went to Clark Atlanta University, which is a historically Black college and university. So, but people don't go that far back and see where that foundational education came from. So, not everyone that leaves an HBCU goes off and gets, multiple degrees. Now, I felt like, since I'm a Black male, I felt like I had to get just getting the MBA at UNC was not enough. I had to go get the Harvard degree in order to be somewhat on a same playing level of someone, let's call it a white male that has a BA somewhere. Just think about that. This guy's got 3 master's degrees and a bachelor's degree, And now he's thinking that he's just below someone he's going to have to compete with the job. It shouldn't be that way, but it is. But organizations they can't go to, Stanford, they can't go to, all these places and then say, well, the talent pool isn't there. Well, go to Howard, go to Clark Atlanta, go to Morehouse, go to Spelman. So go to those schools where that talent is there, and you get a big pool, and I guarantee you will be surprised.
Well, thank you for that too. And I think that there's a lot that all of us need to continue to learn. And
Absolutely.
I loved what you said, is that you as a firm decided deliberately and intentionally that you were going to have the in-depth conversation. And that must have been scary for you and for, the others in your organization, to open up that box, right? And allow that to happen. But it sounds like it worked out well for you.
It did. It worked out extremely well, actually. And, as you can imagine, there was some hesitation at first. But when that first person, I forget who it was, it wasn't me, but when the first person shared that story and there was nothing but support coming from the organization, that's when people's like, okay, this is different, and it became, at least for me, and I know some people, it became a safe space to be able to have those conversations, because we're all inside, COVID's rampant, we're socially distancing, and all this, madness is going on in the streets. And this is a way to really get a lot of this off our chest. And it brought us together even closer as a firm. And it began to craft a new level of trust between the entire organization.
That's great. Rod, are you optimistic about where we're headed within these organizations that we work with and within our culture as a society? Are you optimistic? Do you like what you're doing? And are you positive? Are you optimistic about what the future holds for us?
Well, I'm more than optimistic for the organizations. I think that there's some smart leaders out there, and we're doing our best to help as many as we can. So anybody on the call, you need some help, culture change, let me know. From a social standpoint, I'm not bullish, but I'm optimistic. I'm fearful that it may be another generation, but I really hope it's not another generation. I hope that I will be able to see change, but there has to be action. I think now people are getting more comfortable having these conversations and doing things in their manner to bring awareness. That wasn't the case. It was just under the surface and you didn't know. Now you know where everyone stands, and that's a good thing. I think the next step is to have, continual and consistent action.
Yeah, that's why I like what John and your organization's done to declare, if I can use that word, where you stand and what you're working on. And it does seem like it's possible. It requires work. There's hard work ahead to make it happen. And if enough people want to step into the hard work, which I believe is happening, then it's going to make a difference. And just like what you've talked about with culture change within an organization, it's not an event. It's not it's not something we do over the weekend. It's a journey that takes a long time. So it's going to continue to take a long time, probably. Rod, we are out of time. We're actually over time, I think, but I appreciate the time that you've put into this. Really, really appreciate it. I hope we get to do this again. And
absolutely, anytime.
Is there anything you'd like to close with? Anything that you'd like the listeners, the people that are on here, the people that will be on here listening to this afterwards to know?
I would say two things: that changing your culture, whether it's individual, organization, or society, is very difficult. And it's not an event. It's not one thing that happens and you declare victory. It's a journey of, change in behaviors and seeing the wins or the fruits from those behavior changes. That's the only way you can have sustainable change over time.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Rod. Have a great weekend, okay?
You too.
All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.